No one knew the exact moment it happened. 1 second, the world was normal, busy cities, people working, scrolling through news feeds, sharing photos of old memories. And then it was gone. Not just the internet, not just power, but everything. Everything that made humans remember who they were. History, data, records, books, photos, even names of place, erased like they never existed. People stood in shock as their phones turned to black screens. Hard drives melted without heat. And even printed newspapers turned to blank sheets right in front of their eyes. Libraries were hollowed, museums became silent shells, and videos on every device played nothing but static. In a single hour, the entire human past vanished without warning. It was like someone had reached into the soul of the planet and ripped out its memory. And above the sky, far beyond the clouds, the Reason watched silently the Valari Dominion. They were not just an alien race. They were the architects of control. For centuries they had conquered planets, not by burning them down, but by destroying. What made them remember their culture, their knowledge, their legacy? They believed history was the root of resistance. If you erase where a species comes from, you erase its will to fight. Earth was their boldest experiment, the defiant planet. Full of chaos and war and spirit, a species too stubborn to kneel, too emotional to be broken. So the Valari had chosen something worse than war. They had erased humanity's entire identity, quietly, surgically, perfectly. At first people panicked, not from pain or bombs or death, but from the emptiness. Schools couldn't teach anything. Governments had no records. Military systems couldn't access old strategies. Scientists stared at equipment they didn't know how to use. Even hospitals couldn't remember how to treat common illnesses. The world didn't just lose its tools. It lost why those tools mattered. No one knew who invented what. No one knew why countries existed. Everything had become silent, still, and terrifying. The only thing that remained was the present. A cold, quiet present where everyone felt lost and alone. Some thought it was a glitch. Others thought it was the end times. But then the ships came, and humanity understood. From above, glowing black vessels appeared in the sky, smooth, silent, without heat or noise. They hovered over major cities without firing a shot. Their presence said everything. We did this. We own your future now. They didn't attack. They didn't speak. They simply watched as humanity fell apart. Within days, order collapsed. Banks failed. Transportation froze. Borders didn't matter anymore. There was no longer a reason to fight for land when no one remembered why the land mattered. Riots broke out, then faded. People screamed, then grew quiet. Hope didn't die with a bang, it faded with confusion. Even world leaders couldn't remember their own history. They stood before microphones and said the same words over and over. We're working to understand. We're looking for answers. We're not sure what happened. But in the shadows of this silence, something unexpected began to form. In the dark corners of broken cities and forgotten highways, a few people refused to go numb. They didn't know who they were. They didn't know what country they lived in. But they knew one thing. This was wrong. A firefighter in New York remembered how to break down a door. A soldier in Siberia could still reload her rifle in the dark. A mother in Johannesburg knew how to make her child laugh, even when she couldn't. Remember the child's birthday? These were not memories of facts. They were memories of feeling, of instinct, of survival. And then there was Elena Ward. She wasn't famous, not anymore. Not even she knew what she used to be. But she woke up in a basement full of books that had turned blank, pages white as snow. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She reached for a pen and started writing. Not the past, but what she felt, what she dreamed, what her hands remembered, even if her mind didn't. She wrote of fire, of music, of resistance, of people who once stood tall. She didn't know if they were real. Deep down, she believed they had been, and that belief was enough. It started small. One notebook passed hand to hand, then a second, then hundreds. People began gathering in dark rooms not to worship the past, but to feel it again, to sing without knowing the words, to draw faces they didn't recognize, to build weapons they didn't remember designing. All across Earth, something old and dangerous was waking up, not memory, but fury. The Valari didn't understand it yet. They thought they had erased the soul of humanity, but what they had really done was remove the cage, the boundaries, the distractions. Without history to hold them back, humans had nothing left but instinct. And under that instinct was a fire the Valari had never seen before. One that didn't need books. One that didn't need records. It only needed a reason to burn, and Earth had just found it. The world had gone quiet after the erasure. Cities stood like hollow bones under gray skies. Streets were empty except for the wind. Screens no longer lit up. Radios were silent. Even the stars above felt more distant, like they had turned their backs on Earth. But in the middle of all that stillness, there were certain things, small, invisible things that refused to be forgotten. They came in flashes, in feelings, in dreams. For some, in action. A boy in ruined Chicago fixed an engine without ever learning how. A woman in West Africa built a wind turbine using scrap, guided only by instinct. Across old Russia, people dug into frozen ground and found metal bunkers filled with gear they couldn't name but knew exactly how to use. These weren't memories, not in the way the Valari thought. These were something deeper, older, the kind of knowledge that lived in the bones, not the brain. And when the Valari watched this behavior through their drones, they didn't understand it. Why do they still resist? One commander asked, his voice cold and mechanical. They should be broken, said another. Their history's gone. But what the Valari never grasped was that history wasn't just in books or data. It lived in the scars passed down through generations. In stories whispered in the dark, in the shape of a clenched fist, in the sound of a mother's lullaby. It was inside the rhythm of a heartbeat, the way hands move when they're scared, but refuse to stop. That was the truth. You can erase a story, but not the spirit that told it. In the shadows of Europe, a resistance began to take shape. It started with 3 people. A silent soldier named Cain, who remembered nothing except how to fight. A teenage girl named Leora, who drew pictures of battles she swore she'd never seen. And Alina Ward, the woman, who kept writing. Together, they formed a cell in the ruins of Berlin. Their mission was simple: survive, observe, and find the others. So they knew there had to be others. They started leaving signs across the world. Not digital, not traceable. Just symbols burned into stone. A rising flame, a hand holding, a spark, a circle with 3 stars inside. People didn't know what they meant, but when they saw them, they felt something, and they followed. The resistance grew quietly and everywhere. In the forests of Brazil, an old ranger taught young fighters how to move like shadows. In Australia, a group of farmers built EMP weapons from scavenged parts. In India, a railway mechanic discovered a buried alien. Pro-band learned how to overload it just by listening to its hum, the Valari noticed. They started calling it residual memory leakage. But they were wrong. It wasn't memory leaking through. It was humanity leaking out. And with every passing day, the resistance grew bolder. One night, in the ruins of Paris, a small team led by Cain attacked a Valari patrol station. The aliens expected fear, but what they got was fire. The humans moved with purpose, used tactics no one had taught them. They fought in silence, but with precision. Their weapons were built from junk, but they worked. And when it was done, when the smoke cleared and the Valari lay scattered like fallen statues, Cain didn't celebrate. He simply looked to the sky and said, "They took our past, but they just gave us our war." Back at the Berlin cell, Alina found something strange in an abandoned library. Long since cleared by Valari drones, she discovered a sealed room, not with books, but with paintings. Murals, BRUSHSTROKS. Art from generations. Long gone, the Valari hadn't destroyed it because they hadn't understood it, and that was their mistake. Because each image showed human strength, human struggle. A face crying out in defiance. A crowd holding hands in fire. A planet scarred but standing. And when Alina looked at those paintings, she didn't just see color. She saw proof. Proof that history wasn't made by machines, it was made by people. And even if the records were gone, fury remained. She took a photo of the largest mural using an old, cracked tablet. Then she drew it again, and again by hand. Passed it through the resistance. Hung it in tunnels. Carved it into broken walls. And soon, people began whispering a new name. The Remember-ers. Not because they knew what came before, but because they remembered what mattered. That night, across the resistance networks, a message was sent. Simple, bold, God. So even the Velari could read it. We don't remember your names, don't care about your empire, but we know what we feel, and that feeling is fury. We are the Rememberers. You erased our past. Now we erase your peace. The Velari called it empty noise. But for the first time, they increased security on their capital ship. Because somewhere deep inside their cold, mechanical minds, they started to feel it. Not fear of weapons, not fear of war. Fear of a species that had nothing left to lose. There were no more schools, no more timelines, no holidays, no history books, no names for the wars humans once fought.
Oh.
The Velari had taken all of it. But as their ships floated over Earth's dark skies, quiet, watchful, unchallenged, strange, shift was happening beneath the surface. One the Velari didn't understand, one they couldn't control. And it began not with leaders or armies, but with scattered individuals acting on instinct in the snow-covered ruins of Alaska. A young man with no memory of his parents carved shapes into stone walls, not words he didn't know how to spell. Just symbols. Wolves, shields, a burning sky. He didn't know why he drew them, only that it made him feel alive. As he worked, he found himself humming a melody that had no source. Later, he would learn others were humming the same tune, thousands of miles apart. With no radio, no internet, just feeling. In Cairo, a woman led a convoy of trucks through crumbling streets, dodging Velari patrols like she'd done it 100 times before, but she hadn't. She couldn't even remember how engines worked. But her hands moved faster than her thoughts, fixing wires, redirecting fuel, organizing supply chains. She didn't know who she had been. She knew what she was now needed. She was part of something bigger, something rising. The resistance wasn't planned. It was reactive, emotional, and that made it dangerous. Because the Velari had always believed logic was power, emotion was weakness. Couldn't see that humans were building something not out of knowledge, but out of pure survival instinct. In a shattered mountain pass in Asia, Kane's strike team set an ambush. There, weapons were handmade steel pipes fused with stolen alien cores. Their armor was stitched together from scavenged gear and melted plating. And yet, when the enemy patrol arrived, it was the Velari who panicked. They had expected confusion. Instead, they were met with silence and precision. Each human moved without hesitation. They weren't guessing. They weren't afraid. They remembered just. Not in words or pictures. They remembered in the way they moved. One Velari soldier was dragged away before he could call for help. Another found a trip mine made from an old music speaker and a melted fusion cell. When the fight ended, Kane looked. Over the battlefield, his jaw tight. "We don't need their history," he muttered. "We're writing our own." Meanwhile, Alina Ward had reached the ruins of Rome. She stood beneath the broken pillars of what used to be a place of gods and empire, feeling the ground under her boots. She didn't know why she had come. But something pulled her here. As she walked, she saw other travelers, quiet, dusty, carrying weapons, or dragging carts of scrap. Some stared at the ruins. Others touched the stones like they were trying to wake up old ghosts. No one said a word. Then a child approached Alina, dirty, barefoot, holding something wrapped in cloth. The girl unwrapped it. Broken stone tablet, and on it, etched clumsily by a child's hand, was a single word. Alina knelt beside her. You wrote this? The child nodded. I don't know what it means, but it feels like the right word. Alina smiled just slightly. It is. It's because while the Valari had taken Earth's past, they had forgotten to account for its plays. Anger. And human anger wasn't a quick flame. It was deep, long, patient, and now it was spreading. In orbit, Valari commanders grew concerned. Their scouts were disappearing. Their surveillance feeds were failing. Whole zones went dark. It wasn't a military attack. It was something worse, though. Collapse of control, and then, one night, Earth answered in the only language it had left, an explosion. A Valari outpost in northern Canada, once thought unbreachable, was vaporized in seconds. Not by alien weapons, by humans. Using their own twisted tech against them, the device had no design, no schematics. Shouldn't have worked, but it did. And it was only the beginning. The Valari issued a new order. Classify humanity as unstable. Monitor all clusters. Prevent emotional spread. They didn't realize it was too late. This wasn't an emotion anymore. It was a movement. From burned cities to abandoned farms. Humans carved the same word onto walls, onto metal, into the dirt. Fury. Not in protest, in promise. The erasure had failed. It hadn't killed humanity's story. It had lit the match for a new one, and it was being written not in ink, but in fire. The Valari believed they were still in control. From their orbiting ships and high-altitude drones, they watched. Earth like a scientist watches a lab rat. They measured heat signatures, tracked movement, and listened for patterns in the static. On the surface, things looked calm. Cities remained quiet. No military force had been officially rebuilt. No world government had formed. To the Valari, that meant the experiment was still working. Humanity had been shattered. No past, no direction, no future. But they didn't see the fire. Not the fire in cities. The fire beneath them. It was quiet, careful, but alive. In the hollowed-out tunnels of old subway lines beneath New York, hundreds gathered in silence. Not to fight, not yet, but to feel. Alina Ward stood in the middle, holding up a small, flickering screen powered by a hand-cranked generator. She played an image she had redrawn from memory, a mural of humans rising from ash. No one in the crowd remembered where it was from. They didn't have to. Their fists clenched, their eyes watered. They knew what it meant. We don't need to remember the facts, Alina said. We remember the fire across the broken surface of Earth. That fire was now burning in 100 different places, in old mines of South Africa. Families repurposed drilling rigs into kinetic cannons. In the frozen barrens of Canada, hunters became snipers, learning to track Valari patrols by watching the sky and listening to the wind in Tokyo's ruins. Children mapped enemy drone patterns in chalk, passing the knowledge in rhymes that spread like games. It wasn't an army. It was a pulse. And soon, that pulse began to beat faster. Then the impossible happened. A Valari drone, a high-orbit class, designed to resist any hacking attempt, fell. Out of the sky, not destroyed, hijacked by humans. Kane's team had done it. He didn't know how. He didn't even understand half the controls. But his fingers had moved like they'd done it before. Guided by something deeper than training, rage made his mind sharp. Fury made him bold. And when the drone systems went silent, he had looked up at the stars and said only one thing: now we learn their secrets. It was a turning point, because inside that drone wasn't just tech, it was information. Coordinates of Valari strongholds, communication protocols, taproots, weaknesses, flaws, everything they thought humanity would never understand. Right there inside their own machine, the resistance didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They moved. Strike. Teams began forming around the globe, small, mobile, furious. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't need orders. They followed one rule: hit fast, hit hard, disappear in less than 2 weeks. 7 Valari outposts went dark. 4 drone hubs were dismantled. 1 command shuttle was brought down over the Pacific. crashing into the ocean in flames. The galaxy still didn't know Earth was fighting back. Not officially. Not in any organized war. But the Volari knew, and for the first time. They started fearing shadows. Commanders began arguing in encrypted channels. They should be broken, one said. Why are they still attacking? Another answered. Because they don't need history to hate us. And that was the truth. Humans no longer needed facts or records to justify resistance. The erasure had removed the memory, but what was left behind was pure purpose. The kind that didn't need explanation, only direction, in the ruined city of Istanbul. A girl named Marin lit a bonfire made from enemy wreckage and stood at the top of a crumbling monument. She held no weapon, wore no armor. But when she spoke, thousands listened on foot through shortwave over hacked alien coms. They think we forgot. But we didn't. We may not know the names of our ancestors, but we remember what they felt. We remember the burning, and now we burn back. Resistance leaders didn't make plans in conference rooms. They made them in whispers, in sparks, in looks exchanged across rubble. They would take the war to the stars one day, but first, they would finish reclaiming Earth. One drone, one patrol. One fallen station at a time. The Volari thought their victory was clean, precise, permanent. But all they had done was rip the skin off something ancient, and now they were facing the one thing they couldn't erase. Human fury that had nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. The Volari commanders were no longer calm. What had started as a controlled, experimenting, elegant dismantling of Earth's spirit had turned into a wildfire they couldn't contain. Their intelligence reports had stopped making sense. Resistance. Cells were acting with precision far beyond their tech level. Strike patterns appeared random on maps, but there was a rhythm underneath it all, something primal, something terrifying. Earth wasn't just surviving, it was striking back, and no one, not even the Valaris High Circle, could explain how. They believed they had erased the roots of humanity. They believed humans would forget how to fight. They had misjudged something very old, very deep, something that didn't come from books or recordings. It came from pain, from survival, from fury that had slept too long in an abandoned military base in the Rockies. A new kind of forge had been lit, not for bullets, not for machines, but for weapons built from instinct. Kane stood in front of a table filled with alien tech scraps. Wires, energy cores, burnt-out relays, and bent plating, all stolen from Volari wreckage. Around him, a team of scavengers, mechanics, engineers, former farmers worked in silence. None of them remembered how to build weapons, but together, they built something new, something that worked, something that hurt the enemy. The weapon didn't have a name. It didn't need one. The first time they tested it on a captured Volari drone, cut through its shields like paper. Kane didn't. Smiled, he just nodded and said, "Good, make 50. It was the beginning of something greater. The Rememberers weren't just rebels anymore. They were inventors of pain, and their greatest weapon wasn't steel or plasma. It was fury turned into design, across the world. Others were doing the same. In the forests of the Amazon, warriors laced poison into spears that bypassed Volari armor. In the cracked deserts of Nevada, miners shaped ground-based railguns that fired without satellites. In Southeast Asia, children rigged traps that tricked Volari scanners into seeing heat ghosts, leading patrols into dead zones where they never came back. Humanity was adapting dash fast, and the Volari had no answer, because their entire strategy was built on breaking minds. But they had forgotten one truth. You can't break what has already lost everything. One night, on the outskirts of Cairo, a full Volari gunship was brought down. No missiles, no swarm of fighters, just 2 resistant snipers and 1 experimental pulse weapon. The ship exploded mid-dash air. No survivors. The next morning, humans dragged its burning, frame into the center of a nearby village and raised a flag on top black cloth with a white flame painted in blood. The message was clear. We are not afraid anymore. Meanwhile, Lena Ward had finally reached an old, forgotten satellite relay site buried beneath the sands of northern Africa. It had once been used for Earth communications. Now it was dead, but she believed she could wake it. She didn't remember. How she knew, she just knew, using parts stolen from a broken Volari beacon. She powered up the relay and sent the first broadcast to the outer system in months. Her voice, raw and steady, echoed into space. This is Earth. We do not remember who we were, but we remember that we were something. And whatever we are now, it's enough to end you. That signal traveled far. It reached secret colonies and distant moons. It reached pirate ships hiding in asteroid belts. It reached other conquered worlds. And for the first time in decades, someone else answered, Earth stands. Then maybe we can too. The Volari had hoped to isolate humanity, but they had just awakened a symbol, and symbols are more dangerous than weapons. Back in orbit, a meeting of Volari tacticians turned bitter. Humanity is unstable, one declared. They create out of rage. Worse, another said quietly. They thrive in it. And then came the word no one dared to speak before. We may not win this. Because what they had erased history, memory. Identity had been replaced with something stronger, purpose and purpose. When fueled by pain and fire is impossible to stop, the rememberers were not rebuilding the old world. They were forging a new one. One strike at a time, one broken drone at a time, one fallen Volari station at a time. No leaders, no manuals. No history books, just fury turned into invention. And that fury now had a face. A name, a direction. It was called Earth. For weeks, the Volari Dominion had watched Earth from above, still clinging to the illusion of control. From their command ships in low orbit, they studied surface patterns, ran simulations, and fed their systems data about population clusters and heat zones. But no model could explain what they were seeing. Resistance wasn't collapsing, was accelerating, not with coordination, not with orders, but like wildfire. Each pocket of survivors moved like it knew what the others were doing. No connection, no transmissions. Yet the strikes came at the same time. It's the same rhythm, same rage. The Dominion's leaders called it chaos, but to the humans on the ground, it was instinct. And that night, as the clouds over the Indian Ocean turned red, the Volari saw something they hadn't expected. Earth was coming for the sky. The Phoenix-class warcraft, built in secret in the underground hangars of the Siberian resistance, lifted off with a scream that shook mountains. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't clean. It was a beast of steel and fire stitched together from old launch systems. Shattered Volari cores and rage-fueled design no one could fully explain. They called it the Ash, Bringe. It was built to survive. It was built to break orbit and hit first inside. The crew was a mix of everything Earth had left scrappers. Former engineers, farm kids who didn't know their own last names. None of them had ever been in space. But every single one had one thing in common. They weren't fighting for the past. They were fighting because what had been stolen would never be returned, and they were done asking for it back. As the ash tore through the sky, Earth held its breath. People climbed onto rooftops, into mountains, onto hills, and watched with wide, silent eyes. For the first time since the erasure, they looked up and didn't see defeat. They saw fire rising. The Volari were ready. Their orbital defenses locked on. Anti-armor cannons charged. Dozens of drones swarmed. The enemy had numbers, precision, superiority, but they didn't have human desperation or rage. The Ashbringer took fire from the moment it breached the cloud layer. Its shields, if they could even be called, that flickered and died in seconds. Hull integrity dropped. Its left wing was nearly torn off, and yet it kept going. Inside the pilot, a woman named Celine, who used to be a train conductor in Madrid, flew like she had been born in a cockpit. She didn't know the names of the stars. She didn't need to. Her hands moved faster than thought. Her eyes locked on the first Valari drone swarm, and she whispered into the com, "You erased the wrong planet." Then the Ashbringer struck. Its cannons weren't elegant. They were brutal. Modified fusion lances powered by rage and desperation. They sliced through the enemy swarm, cutting down precision with chaos. Half the drones exploded. The rest broke formation. A Valari gunship moved to intercept, but was hit from below by a secondary human strike force launching from the Andes Mountains. They weren't alone anymore. The sky was filling. Another ship patched together from old space station modules, and a stolen propulsion engine shot upward behind them. Then another, and 5. They weren't fleets, they were flares. Warnings Earth was no longer just defending. Earth was taking the war off the ground. Inside the Valari command cruiser, alarms blared. "Multiple launches detected," said one AI voice. "Human forces breaching orbit. Trajectory unstable," said another, "but accelerating beyond prediction." They couldn't compute what was happening because it wasn't logical. It was emotional. It was willpower as a weapon down on the surface. Alina Ward sent out a broadcast from a reclaimed Valari relay tower. "This is not a resistance. This is evolution. You erased our past. You became something else. You erased our heroes. So now we fight without needing them. You didn't kill history. You replaced it with fury. And we don't need to remember to win." Across Earth's battered lands, humans cheered not because victory was near, but because for the first time, they realized they were no longer alone in the fight. Others were rising. Ships were climbing. And the sky, once dark with surveillance, was now burning with rebellion. The Ashbringer didn't survive its first mission. Selene knew it wouldn't. It rammed straight into the Valari orbital defense grid and detonated its core, taking 3 enemy vessels with it in the explosion. A piece of the ship's burning hull rained back down to Earth. Landing in the sands of northern Africa, scavengers pulled it from the crater. Welded onto it were words, burned by hand into the metal, "For Earth, for fire, for the future." That piece was raised above the Resistance's first orbital launch site the next morning, not as a tombstone, as a beginning, and from that day forward, the Valari stopped calling humanity primitive. They gave it a new name in their language. It translated to "the species that will not fall." And far above Earth, in the silence of the stars, the next wave of human ships was already climbing. In the cold emptiness of space, the Valari were calculating everything. Angles, heat signatures, weapon frequencies, resistant cell movement. Their AI cores predicted outcomes with near-perfect precision. According to their models, humanity was supposed to be broken. No records, no guidance, no past, just scattered groups of survivors clinging to the edge of extinction. But nothing in their calculations could explain what had just happened. The Ashbringer had been destroyed. Yes, but not before it shattered their orbital shield wall. Not before it turned a silent, occupied Earth into a battlefield, glowing with the heat of rebellion. Now, dozens of human strike teams were operating not just on the ground, but in the sky. New ships, rusted, sharp, barely flying, were making short jumps into low orbit, hitting and retreating. Hitting again. Earth's skies were no longer quiet, and it wasn't just tactics that shocked the array. It was something deeper, something they couldn't predict, something alien. To them, humans weren't just surviving, they were united. And that's what terrified the Valari the most. Because the last time humans had truly worked together before the erasure, they had built empires, cracked atoms, walked on other worlds. And now, with no nations, no borders, no flags, just pain and fire, they were more connected than ever. In a hidden resistance stronghold beneath the Himalayas, leaders from across the globe gathered, not with titles, not with rank, but with shared understanding. Kane stood at the edge of a long metal table, one hand resting on a stolen Valari beacon core. "They don't fear our weapons," he said. "They fear that we're not fighting for our past anymore, we're fighting for each other." Beside him, Alina Ward unrolled a cloth filled with pieces of Earth's erased culture charcoal sketches of the old murals. Pages of rewritten songs, fragments of stories told around campfires. We never needed perfect memory, she said. We just needed to remember who we are. That was always enough. In the jungles of South America, tribal fighters teamed with former city engineers to build power cells that glowed red with stolen alien energy. In the deserts of North Africa, nomads guided strike teams through heat storms to reach hidden Valari, landing zones in the ice of Greenland. Scientists and farmers worked side by side to launch crude orbital torpedoes into the sky. No governments, no languages separating them, just a shared fury, and more importantly, a shared goal. The Valari tried. To adapt, they sent in elite shock squads to destroy communication relays. They jammed what few satellites remained. They poisoned water sources. But everywhere they struck, the humans returned stronger, because humans didn't need central command. They didn't rely on technology to connect. They connected through will, through pain, through fire, in the ruins of Los Angeles. Captured Valari, Commander was interrogated not with violence, but with silence. The human resistance leader, a young woman with no name left, simply stared at him as the sounds of rebuilding echoed in the distance. He spoke first. You were not meant to survive this long, she replied calmly. We weren't meant to survive anything. That's why we always do. Stared at her unblinking, as her people around her loaded salvaged weapons and welded steel with their bare hands. What drives you? He asked. She leaned in close and said just one word, each other. That truth became the resistance's core. Valari's strategy was based on division, divide, and erase. But with the past gone, humans had nothing left to divide. No countries. Number. Class. No politics. Just survival, and the burning truth that they only had one another left. And now they were acting like one body. One rage-filled, determined, rising body. Soon after, resistance teams hacked into a Valari deep space listening station. They didn't destroy it. They broadcast from it, all across the stars. You erased our history, but we are still here. We are one. We have no kings, no generals, no gods, just each other. That is all we ever needed. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Other worlds listened, some quietly, some in awe, some with hope, and some fear, because in that moment it became clear humanity was no longer crawling back to its past. It was climbing towards something greater, not driven by old legends or ancient pride, but by the simple, terrifying truth that when humans fight as one, they cannot be stopped. The Valari had underestimated Earth. They thought they had deleted its soul, but what they had done was forge it into something new and far more dangerous. The stars above Earth no longer belonged to the Valari. Their ships still circled the planet like vultures. Their drones still scanned every crater, forest, and ruin. Their leaders still whispered about containment, control, correction. But deep in the hidden corners of Earth, in tunnels and bunkers and broken cities, the final blow was already being prepared, not by a government, not by an empire, but by humanity itself. And they weren't just going to fight back. They were going to end it in a resistant stronghold carved into the frozen rock of Antarctica. Lena Ward stood before the largest group of survivors ever gathered. Fighters, scavengers, engineers, children, elders, different languages, different skin, different memories. And yet all of them stood under one symbol, a white flame painted on a black wall. The symbol of the rememberers. No one clapped. No. One shouted. They simply listened, because they all felt it. The final hour was near. Elena's voice was soft, but strong. They thought, stealing our history would make us weak, but it made us dangerous. It made us free from everything that ever divided us. They erased our books, our stories, our victories, but they couldn't erase what we are. Beside her, Kane activated the final mission plan. 12 makeshift human warships each, one barely holding together. Each one powered by stolen alien cores, and pure human rage would launch into orbit and breach the Valari flagship. Not to take it, not to steal from it, to destroy it. Because inside that ship, deep in its vault, was the final piece of Valari technology, the memory engine, the weapon they had used to erase Earth's past. Still running, still feeding their control systems, still pulsing with stolen identity, if it could be destroyed, the system would collapse. Not just over Earth, but across the entire Valari Empire. The mission wasn't a strategy. It was a message. Humanity was done begging for its past back. They were going to burn the future into existence. The ships launched at dawn. Sky after sky lit up, with engines made. From scavenged hope, they weren't sleek, weren't beautiful. They looked like broken fists thrown at the stars. But they moved fast, hard, unstoppable. The Valari fleet scrambled. Interceptors raced forward, beam weapons fired. Dozens of human ships were struck, torn apart, swallowed by flames, but for every one that fell, another flew through the gap. On board the lead vessel, the Emberwake, Kane led the charge. He didn't pray, he didn't speak. He simply stared at the flagship, head and locked onto the glowing core in its center. His final message, BROADCAST, across all human frequencies, was just a few words. They erased our fathers, our mothers, our heroes. Now we become our own legends. This is not revenge. This is memory, rewritten in fire. The Emberwake slammed into the flagship and then silence. For a moment, the stars blinked, and then the core exploded. White ripples surged through the black, shattering the Valari systems. Shields collapsed. Engines died. Communication links fractured into static. Across Earth, the sky lit up as enemy ships fell, one by one, crashing into the oceans, mountains, deserts. The flagship was gone. So was the memory engine. And in that moment, something impossible happened. People began to remember. Not everything. Not perfectly, but enough, eh? Name, a face, a smell from childhood, a song from a mother's voice, a battlefield cry. It wasn't data. It wasn't organized, but it came like a wave. Of warmth and color, the Valari tried to wipe it all away. But memory isn't just in words. It's in us, and the fire that had burned without names. Finally had faces again. Elena stood under the stars, staring at the sky now filled with falling metal, and she whispered, "We are not the past. We are not the erasure. We are what comes after. We are the fury that couldn't be forgotten." Across Earth, as the last of the Valari ships crashed into dust, the people didn't cheer. They lit fires, and around those fires they told stories. Some true, some imagined, some reborn, and in every story, one truth remained. Humanity didn't need its history to win, because in the end, they became the story.